Hi, good evening. So tonight's essential question is, can you describe how matter moves through the biosphere? So we're going back to chapter 3.4 in our book, talking about matter cycles. So a physical science review on some of these terms, matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. So that's in the form of liquids, solids, or gases. So essentially everything around you is considered matter. Even the invisible air that you breathe is considered matter as well. So energy, going back to trophic levels, energy flows through an ecosystem. It's used up. So all the producers and consumers within the ecosystem, that is how energy flows through it, through those different trophic levels. Now matter, on the other hand, is recycled or cycled within between ecosystems. So we'll talk about those different types of cycles of matter. So a little review on some thermodynamics concepts. Matter moves through these cycles. It's never created or destroyed. It's only changed or transformed. So an example of that, let's take carbon as our matter example. Carbon from fossil fuels, when it's burned up and turned into carbon dioxide gas, that is an example of how carbon cycles through an ecosystem. Carbon dioxide isn't created out of nothing. It has to be transformed from the carbon originally that was found in that fossil fuel. So matter cycles through a couple different types of processes: biological, geological, and chemical processes. So we use this long-term biogeochemical cycles. So an example of biological processes or biological cycles are all the activities that are performed by living organisms. So all the types of matter that is cycled through eating, breathing, and eliminating waste, those are examples of biological processes of cycles of matter. Now, geological, or any type of process that is formed within the earth or have anything to do with sediment breaking down or formation of rock. Any gas that is released through, let's say, a volcano or any other geological feature, that's considered a geological process. And even the formation of fossil fuels and other sediments, that is also considered a geological process, a geological cycle of matter. Now, chemical cycles are any type of, we bunch this in with physical as well. So chemical and physical processes. This includes examples of formation of clouds and precipitation within the water cycle. Water is cycled through the ecosystem through a lot of chemical and physical processes. Lightning also plays a role in chemical and physical changes of matter. Now, humans can also affect the the matter cycles throughout an ecosystem. Burning fossil fuels is a chemical change, and so we are adding to the carbon cycle by burning fossil fuels. Anytime we clear land for farming or buildings, we are affecting many different types of matter cycles by doing that. Burning forests, and even when we talked about fertilizer and its effects of algae, we're adding nitrogen into an ecosystem. That's going to change some of that nitrogen cycles. So human activities also affect cycles of matter too. Now, nutrients are a type of matter, and nutrients are needed to carry out life processes. So nutrients, like I said, is a type of matter. They can change and transform as well. So water, carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus all change in different types of forms within an ecosystem. And these are called nutrients because they are all needed for life. So we're just going to focus on the nitrogen cycle. So this is a nutrient that's needed for all types of life. Nitrogen gas is the main form of nitrogen found in our biosphere. It makes up 78% of Earth's atmosphere. And nitrogen is very important to life because there's nitrogen in our DNA, which is the genetic information in all organisms. And so that nitrogen in our DNA was once nitrogen found elsewhere within the ecosystem. It has been cycled through and formed into your DNA, which is pretty neat to think about. So then how does nitrogen within an ecosystem change? So for instance, how does nitrogen go from nitrogen gas to the nitrogen that's in our DNA? Well, there are a couple different types of processes. There's one called nitrogen fixation, and so it's taking nitrogen gas which is in the form of N2, and it's fixing it or changing it into a different type of nitrogen that organisms can use on land. So for instance, here is nitrogen gas. Organisms can't use this nitrogen gas, and so through the process of nitrogen fixation, it can turn it into nitrogen that organisms can use, for instance, ammonia, NH3. Now there's a couple ways that nitrogen fixation happens. One way is through lightning, and this is a chemical process. So lightning can break nitrogen atoms apart in the atmosphere and turn it into NO3 or nitrate, so that nitrogen gas that plants cannot use is fixed by the lightning during lightning storms and turned into NO3 in the soil, which plants can take up and use. So plants really do rely on this process of nitrogen fixation to get the nitrogen that they need. Now there's different biological ways nitrogen can be fixed as well. One way is through nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil. And so this kind of does the same type of process. This bacteria fixes the nitrogen gas in the air and turns it into nitrogen that plants can use. So not all plants can do this, only certain plants can, but these plants do rely on this process of nitrogen fixation to get their nitrogen. Now the opposite can happen too, through this process of denitrification. So it's the opposite of nitrogen fixation. And this happens because bacteria decompose dead organisms in the soil, and it converts that nitrate and ammonia back into nitrogen gas and puts it back in the atmosphere as N2 gas, nitrogen gas. Now another way that nitrogen cycles can be affected or changed is through the process of eutrophication. And so we learned about this with our lab, with our algae and fertilizer lab. And so farmers and gardeners and homeowners who want a nice green lawn use fertilizers and put a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Those are all plant food. That helps plants grow. But when these nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium fertilizers run off into, let's say, a river, a lake, or a stream, it causes a lot of algae to grow because algae is a plant and it loves these types of minerals, these types of nutrients. And so we are affecting this growth because we are the ones adding the fertilizers. So humans can have an effect on these nitrogen cycles as well. Okay, so for the video notes to answer in the Google form that's found on my class site, I want you to explain the difference between energy and matter within the biosphere, and then provide 2 examples of how nitrogen cycles through the biosphere. So be very specific in your response. Don't forget to read through your notes again. There's a lot of stuff in these video notes, a lot of heavy material. So reading through will help you understand and help you retain that knowledge. Highlight, underline, and then don't forget to interact with your notes by coming up with 2 questions and a summary at the bottom. I'll be looking for that tomorrow. And remember, I'll be checking it for 5 points. See you tomorrow in class.